What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors reaches his absolute breaking point on live television? What happens when years of built-up frustration finally explode in front of millions of viewers? You're about to witness the most intense moment in daytime TV history, as Robert De Niro completely loses it during what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview. This isn't just another celebrity disagreement. This is a full-blown eruption that left the entire studio speechless and the internet buzzing for weeks. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment telling me what you think really triggered De Niro's explosive reaction. The atmosphere in the View studio was already thick with tension before Robert De Niro even took his seat. The legendary actor had arrived to promote his latest film, but something about his demeanor suggested this wasn't going to be your typical celebrity chat. Joy Behar, notorious for her sharp tongue and confrontational style, seemed particularly eager to dig into controversial topics rather than stick to the usual promotional script. "So, Bobby," Joy began with that familiar smirk, completely ignoring the fact that De Niro had specifically requested to be called Robert during the pre-interview briefing. "I have to ask about your recent comments regarding the political climate. Some people are saying you've become a bit too outspoken for an actor." De Niro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His publicist, sitting just off camera, shifted nervously in her chair. This wasn't the agreed-upon line of questioning. "Well, Joy," De Niro replied, his voice measured but with an edge, "I think actors have every right to express their opinions like any other American citizen. We're not just dancing monkeys here for entertainment." "Oh, but come on," Joy interrupted, leaning forward with that antagonistic gleam in her eyes. "Don't you think there's a difference between having an opinion and using your platform to influence people who might not be as, let's say, informed as you are?" The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. De Niro's hands, resting on the arm of his chair, began to clench slightly. "Informed?" De Niro repeated, his famous intensity starting to show. "Are you suggesting that regular Americans can't think for themselves? That they need to be protected from hearing different viewpoints?" Joy laughed dismissively, a sound that seemed to cut through the studio like nails on a chalkboard. "I'm just saying that when someone like you speaks, people listen. Maybe you should be more careful about what you're putting out there." "More careful," De Niro said slowly, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone that anyone who'd watched his movies would recognize as a warning sign. "Let me ask you something, Joy. How long have you been telling people what to think on this show?" The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Whoopi Goldberg tried to jump in with a joke to lighten the mood, but Joy was having none of it. "I've been in this business for decades, Bobby. I think I know a thing or two about responsibility." "It's Robert," he said firmly. "And responsibility? You want to talk about responsibility? Let's talk about the responsibility of journalists to actually ask real questions instead of setting up gotcha moments for their own agenda." Joy's face flushed red. This wasn't going according to her plan at all. She was used to celebrities backing down when she pushed, not pushing back harder. "I think you're being a little dramatic," she said, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is just a conversation." "No, this isn't a conversation," De Niro shot back, his voice rising slightly. "A conversation implies two people actually listening to each other. What you're doing is trying to create a soundbite that makes me look bad, so you can feel superior." The studio audience was dead silent. You could practically hear a pin drop as one of Hollywood's most intimidating actors squared off against one of daytime TV's most aggressive hosts. "I think you need to calm down," Joy said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone that had annoyed guests for years. De Niro's eyes flashed dangerously. "Calm down? You bring me here under false pretenses, ambush me with loaded questions, disrespect me by calling me the wrong name repeatedly, and then tell me to calm down when I call you out on your behavior?" Joy realized she had pushed too far, but her ego wouldn't let her back down. "Look, if you can't handle a simple interview without getting upset, maybe you should stick to acting and leave the political commentary to the professionals." That was the moment. The exact second when Robert De Niro's legendary composure finally snapped completely. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The Robert De Niro that millions knew from Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, and Casino suddenly emerged, not as a character, but as himself, unleashing decades of pent-up frustration on live television. Professionals? De Niro's voice exploded across the studio, causing several audience members to physically jump in their seats. You think you're a professional? Let me tell you what a professional looks like, Joy. He leaned forward in his chair, his entire body language shifting into something predatory and intense. The camera operators instinctively zoomed in, capturing every detail of his rage. A professional does their homework. A professional respects their guests. A professional doesn't sit there with that smug little smirk thinking they're gonna make someone look stupid on national television just to boost their own ego. Joy tried to interrupt, raising her hand dismissively, but De Niro's voice cut through her attempt like a blade. No, you don't get to talk now. You've been talking for the last 10 minutes without saying a damn thing worth hearing. You brought me here to promote a film, remember? But instead, you wanted to play your little games. Ask your loaded questions, and when I don't dance to your tune, you tell me to calm down? The other host sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this volcanic eruption continue. Whoopi Goldberg's mouth was literally hanging open. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. You know what your problem is? De Niro continued, his finger now pointing directly at Joy, his voice carrying that unmistakable Brooklyn edge that had intimidated movie audiences for decades. You think being loud and obnoxious makes you smart. You think interrupting people and talking over them makes you tough. But all it makes you is rude. Joy's face had gone from red to purple. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped her note cards. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, she stammered. Actually, you do. De Niro fired back immediately. Because this is your show, and you created this situation. You wanted the real Robert De Niro? Well, congratulations. You got him. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras clicking as photographers captured every moment of this unprecedented meltdown. For 40 years I've been coming on shows like this, being respectful, answering the same stupid questions over and over again. And usually I get treated with at least basic human decency. But you, Joy, you decided to be different. You decided to be nasty. His voice dropped to that menacing whisper that had made him famous, but somehow it carried to every corner of the studio. You sit there every day, tearing people down, making snide comments, thinking you're some kind of journalistic crusader. But you know what you really are? You're a bully. A bully hiding behind a desk and a microphone. Joy finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. How dare you call me a bully? I'm asking legitimate questions. De Niro let out a harsh laugh that sent chills through the audience. Legitimate questions? Was it a legitimate question when you suggested that regular Americans are too stupid to hear my opinions? Was it legitimate when you kept calling me Bobby after I corrected you? Was it legitimate when you told me I should stick to acting and leave thinking to the professionals? Each question hit like a verbal punch, and Joy visibly flinched with every word. You don't ask questions, Joy. You make statements disguised as questions. You don't interview people, you ambush them. And when they push back, you act like they're the problem. The audience was completely silent, but you could see people throughout the studio nodding in agreement. Even some of the crew members were barely suppressing smiles. You want to know about responsibility? De Niro's voice was building again, reaching a crescendo that would echo through television history. Your responsibility is to treat people with respect. Your responsibility is to have honest conversations. Your responsibility is to lift people up, not tear them down for sport. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but De Niro wasn't finished. But instead, you turn every interview into your personal therapy session, working out whatever issues you have by taking shots at your guests. Well, I've got news for you, sweetheart. I didn't come here to be your punching bag. The word sweetheart dripped with such contempt that it seemed to physically push Joy back in her chair. This was De Niro at his most dangerous, channeling every intimidating character he'd ever played into one devastating real-life performance. The word hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in a street fight. Joy's eyes widened with a mixture of shock and rage, but before she could mount any kind of response, De Niro pressed his advantage with the ruthless precision of a seasoned predator. You think this is entertainment? His voice was now a controlled roar, every syllable delivered with surgical precision. You think humiliating people on television makes for good TV? Let me explain something to you about real entertainment, about real storytelling. He stood up from his chair, and the entire studio seemed to shrink around him. At 78 years old, Robert De Niro still possessed that magnetic presence that had dominated screens for decades, and now it was focused entirely on destroying Joy Behar. When I make a movie, when I create a character, I do it with purpose. I do it to tell a story that means something, that connects with people, that maybe makes them think or feel something real. But what you do here, this isn't storytelling. This is just cheap, mindless cruelty dressed up as journalism. Joy tried to stand as well, perhaps thinking she could match his physical presence, but the moment she rose from her chair, De Niro's gaze locked onto her with such intensity that she immediately sat back down. "Don't," he said simply, and the single word carried more authority than a shouted command. Whoopi Goldberg finally tried to intervene, her voice shaking slightly. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." "No," De Niro said without even looking at her, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. "We're not taking a break. Joy wanted to have this conversation, so we're going to have it. All of it." The producers in the control room were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but the ratings were through the roof. This was television gold, even if it was completely destroying one of their hosts. "You asked me about responsibility," De Niro continued, beginning to pace slowly behind his chair like a caged animal. "Let me tell you about the responsibility I feel every time I step in front of a camera. I know that people are watching. I know that what I do and say matters. So I try to bring something real, something honest, something that might actually contribute to the world instead of just tearing it down." Joy found her voice again, though it was considerably smaller than before. "I'm trying to hold people accountable." De Niro stopped pacing and turned to face her fully, his expression one of complete disbelief. "Accountable? To who? To you? What makes you qualified to hold anyone accountable for anything? What have you ever created? What have you ever built? What have you ever done except sit behind that desk and throw stones at people who are actually trying to make something meaningful?" The questions hit like a series of devastating body blows. Joy's carefully constructed media persona was crumbling in real time, and everyone in the studio could see it happening. "I've been a journalist for 30 years, she protested weakly. "No," De Niro shot back immediately, his voice rising again. "You've been a performer for 30 years. There's a difference. A journalist seeks truth. A journalist asks hard questions because they want real answers, not because they want to create drama. You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a shock jock in a pantsuit." The audience gasped audibly at this line. Several people could be heard whispering to each other, and the energy in the room had shifted completely. What had started as Joy's attempted ambush had turned into her complete and total humiliation. "You want to talk about being outspoken?" De Niro's voice was building to another crescendo. "You want to question whether I should use my platform to express my views? Let's talk about how you use yours. Every single day, you sit in that chair and spread negativity. Every single day, you look for ways to tear people down, to find the worst in every situation, to make people feel bad about themselves and each other." He moved closer to the desk, and Joy actually leaned back in her chair, as if his words were physically pushing her away. "You hide behind this idea that you're being provocative, that you're starting important conversations. But all you're really doing is feeding the anger and division that's already tearing this country apart. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution." Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now. "That's not fair." "Fair?" De Niro's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to ambush me today? Was it fair to ignore what I actually wanted to talk about so you could score cheap political points? Was it fair to treat me like some kind of dancing monkey who should just shut up and entertain people?" The other hosts were looking everywhere except at Joy, who seemed to be shrinking smaller with each passing second. "You know what I think?" De Niro leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk, bringing himself to eye level with Joy. "I think you're jealous. I think you're bitter because you've spent your whole career talking about other people's achievements instead of having any of your own. I think you resent people who actually create things, who actually contribute something positive to the world." Joy's eyes were starting to well up with tears, but De Niro showed no mercy. "You've built your entire career on being mean. On being the person who says the things that other people are too decent to say. And you've convinced yourself that makes you brave, that makes you important. But it doesn't. It just makes you sad. The word sad was delivered with such devastating finality that it seemed to echo through the studio for several seconds. Sarah Haynes tried to jump in with a question about De Niro's film, desperately attempting to change the subject, but he held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not finished," he said, his voice now calm but no less dangerous. "Joy asked me about responsibility, so let's talk about her responsibility. Every person who comes on this show, every guest who sits in that chair, they're human beings. They have feelings, they have families, they have lives outside of this studio. But you treat them like props in your personal drama." He straightened up, towering over the desk. "You have a responsibility to those people. You have a responsibility to treat them with basic human dignity. And you have a responsibility to your audience to give them something better than this manufactured outrage, this fake controversy that you create just to keep people watching." Joy finally found some fight left in her, though her voice was still shaking. "I'm not going to sit here and let you attack me like this." "Attack you?" De Niro's voice dropped to that deadly quiet tone again. "Lady, if I was attacking you, you'd know it. This is me explaining to you what you've been doing wrong for years, because clearly nobody else has had the guts to tell you." He walked back around to his chair but didn't sit down, instead standing behind it like he was addressing a courtroom. "You want to know what a real interview looks like? You prepare. You research your guest. You ask questions that actually matter, questions that might help your audience understand something new or see something from a different perspective. You listen to the answers, instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. And you treat your guest like a human being worthy of respect." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. "But most importantly," De Niro continued, his voice building to a final, devastating conclusion, "you remember that your job isn't to make yourself look good by making other people look bad. Your job is to serve your audience by having conversations that actually matter, that actually contribute something positive to the world instead of just adding to the noise." He looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. "People watching this, you deserve better than this. You deserve hosts who respect you enough to have real conversations about real issues. You deserve better than manufactured drama and fake controversies designed to keep you angry and divided." Then he turned back to Joy, who was now openly crying. "And Joy, you can do better than this. I know you can, because nobody gets to where you are without some level of talent and intelligence. But you've let your ego and your need for attention turn you into something ugly. It's not too late to change that, but you have to want to change." He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair and started to put it on. "I came here to talk about my film, about something I'm proud of, something that took years of hard work and collaboration with dozens of talented people. But instead, I got ambushed by someone who wanted to use me as a prop in her little political theater. Well, the show's over, Joy. At least my part in it." As he walked toward the edge of the set, Joy called out desperately, "Where are you going?" De Niro paused and looked back at her one final time. "I'm going back to my life. I'm going back to doing work that actually means something. I suggest you think about doing the same." And with that, Robert De Niro walked off the set of The View, leaving behind the most devastating takedown in daytime television history and a host who would never quite recover from the encounter. The cameras kept rolling as Joy sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face, while the other hosts struggled to figure out how to fill the remaining time. The audience sat in complete silence, having witnessed something unprecedented, something that would be talked about and replayed for years to come. That's the moment when a Hollywood legend reminded everyone why he's considered one of the greatest actors of all time.